consciousness of ancestral memory there in whole.
Hawaii is proud to host the upcoming 13th festival. Australia, Cook Islands, Samoa, Wisdom. The Council is pleased with the opportunity around cultural policy frameworks,
Your Excellencies, Head of State, Heads of Government, members of the Diplomatic Corps, the Director General of the Pacific Community, Dr. Stuart Minchin, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, Isambula Winaka. It is an honor for me to deliver the keynote address this evening to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Festival of Pacific Arts and Culture and the launch of the Pacific Regional Culture Strategy 2022 to 2032. The title of the exhibition, Nawakangu Nonguyao, translates as My Relationship Are My Heritage and Wealth, a rather fitting theme that reinforces our regional unity. I believe for all of us gathered this evening, that mutual goal for a united Blue Pacific and ensuring that the work we do benefits our region and strengthens our relationship as a Pacific family. Across the Pacific, relationships are at the heart of our identities. Our challenges are so great that cooperation is an option, but it's a necessity. At this event and the wider Forum Week reinforces the familiar relationships and strengthens long-standing connections and networks that have been in place for so many years. Fiji is home to citizens of many ethnicities and religions. Every Fijian shares a common value that bonds us. Culture should never drive us into isolation. It is a unifying force because we all share far more in common than we differ. And we are all far stronger together. That is true in Fiji, and it is true across the Pacific. It is why we are here. Ladies and gentlemen, 50 years ago, the first gathering of the Festival of Arts, Pacific Arts and Culture took place right here in Suva on May 1972. So I find it rather fitting that we commemorate this milestone at this leaders' gathering. As head of state, I wear many hats of responsibilities, one of which is the patron of the Fiji Arts Council. So I was greatly pleased to learn that the Fiji Arts Council's forward-thinking and proposing the idea for a regional festival in 1965 and having co-hosted in the very first festival in 1972. As we peruse the many photographs and videos on display at this exhibition, we are taken on a visual voyage that shows a mapping of the changes that have taken place over time. That intrigues us to reflect on how far the festival has come and how it continues to bind us as a region, as well as safeguarding our culture and our identities. Since being founded in 1972, the Festival of Pacific Arts and Culture since offers a rich and an authentic platform for understanding the value and impact of culture and the cultural creativeness industry now and into the future. In addition to safeguarding the many cultures and the identities of our Pacific community. During the early era of the Festival of Pacific Arts and Culture, many Pacific leaders foresaw the potential of Pacific regionalism as a pathway to strengthen Pacific governance and a gateway that led to a Pacific regional identity. Since our independence, Fiji has led in shaping regional agendas and supporting our Pacific way. Our people have always known that gatherings such as these are important, creating space that brings together the communities of the Pacific to exchange cultural learnings as well as traditional knowledge and skills. As Pacific Islanders, let's be honest, it is exciting to be engaging in this space and equally enlightening to see that our culture, traditions, and art remain a priority for us as leaders. The Festival Pacific of Arts and Culture helps lead the conversation of how culture and the creative industries can contribute to both social and economic development. These conversations are linked to our well-being, our livelihood, and our resilience building efforts. We have witnessed the powerful voices of our youth and the use of arts to advocate for climate change, and their eagerness to have their voices heard at decision-making level. While our region has collectively come a long way in engaging our youth, I encourage the leaders in the room this evening to encourage youth engagement in these various spaces. Ladies and gentlemen, Fiji, like many other countries in the Pacific, is progressing its work towards national cultural policy, cultural statistics framework, Fiji's Heritage Bill, and Fiji's Traditional and Ecological Knowledge Bill. As we engage in high-level decision-making, it is crucial that we remember the importance of our shared community values and their contributions to sustainable development. I commend the Pacific community for its people-centered development approach and its effort in prioritizing contextually and culturally relevant approaches to development. Safeguarding, supporting, and promoting our Pacific culture is an end in itself. Yet, at the same time, it makes direct contributions to many sustainable development goals and that drive many of our national development plans. These include safe and sustainable township, employment, economic growth, the environment, equality, as well as peaceful and inclusive societies. Indirect benefits of culture also exist and arise through culturally informed and effective implementation of these development goals. Much has been said in the past about reviving and using the traditional practices of our forefathers to address the issues we currently face, particularly with climate change as with other issues we face. So as our traditional lunar calendar identifies specific foods or plants and related activities, we must ensure that we incorporate the culture agenda in our various spheres of influence. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a tremendous impact in the Pacific. In Fiji, as I would imagine would also be the case for some of our Pacific neighbors, our tourism industry was greatly affected by the pandemic with the loss of jobs and revenues, as well as the impact of climate change in our livelihood and well-being. Tonight's exhibition, Nawekangu Nunguyao, further reinforces the need to gather all groups in Oceania together to ensure a sustainable, secure, and a successful future for coming generations. As we have begun to revitalize our traditional farming and fishing methods, such as Wudi Wudi and Yabirau, I urge all our leaders to reflect on the conversations tonight as you enter into deliberations about the future you envision for our Blue Pacific region. That culture remains significant development priority, with particular focus on resilience building and positive developmental growth for our people. Ladies and gentlemen, it would be rather remiss of me not to acknowledge the Pacific community and the Council of Pacific Arts and Culture for completing this mammoth task of capturing the complexity of culture effectively across the nations of various development needs and priorities. I wish to acknowledge the Pacific Ministers of Culture in endorsing this strategy, noting the provisional endorsement by New Zealand and Australia. The endorsement of the Regional Culture Strategy in April early this year further reinforces our collective efforts in protecting our culture. It cements our regional commitment to our people and draws from the Pacific Leaders Statement in 2014 to collectively commit to work together to achieve sustainable development goals in the Pacific. The Pacific Regional Culture Strategy envisions a future where we treasure diversity and heritage of the Pacific. It seeks an inclusive future in which culture, tradition, and religious beliefs are valued, honored, and developed. That must apply to the culture and religion of all people that call the Pacific home. We have shown the value of that inclusive approach in Fiji. I urge we do the same at regional level. With those few words, it gives me great honor to launch the Pacific Regional Cultural Strategy 2022 to 2032 and wish the leaders well in deliberations throughout this week. May the Almighty bless our Blue Pacific family abundantly with sustainability and prosperity.